Hello everybody and welcome to the Overland Journal Podcast. My name is Ashley Giordano and I'm your host for this episode. And today I'm in Johannesburg, South Africa with...
Hi y'all, I'm Mary Hannah. And
I'm Andy.
And we make up Expedition Rove. We are right now traveling from, the original plan was Cape Town to Cairo, but we have been in Southern Africa now for 4 months, and fates and stars just aligned, and we got to meet up with Ashley here, so pretty excited to sit down with everyone and just kind of chat through the last couple of years of travels and all that stuff.
Yay! Thank you so much for joining me. I've been eager to have you guys on the podcast for quite some time. I've been following your travels for a long time, so I'm really excited about this opportunity to sit down and chat. And you have a wealth of overland experience, so it'll be really fun to pick your brains and get some practical tips for those folks listening on the podcast.
We'll do our best.
This content is brought to you by Overland Journal, our premium quality print publication. The magazine was founded in 2006 with the goal of providing independent equipment and vehicle reviews, along with the most stunning adventures and photography. We care deeply about the countries and cultures we visit and share our experiences freely with our readers. We also have zero advertorial policy and do not accept any advertiser compensation for our reviews. By subscribing to Overland Journal, you're helping to support our employee-owned and veteran-owned publication. Your support also provides resources and funding for content like you are watching or listening to right now. You can subscribe directly on our website at overlandjournal.com.
So you guys are traveling in a
2010 Land Rover Defender
110.
Yes, ma'am. You knew it.
Nice. Yeah. And name is?
Tango.
Nice.
It actually got named Tango before
we actually bought it.
Yeah. So at the time we were in Bolivia on the Uyuni salt flats, and we did the typical Land Rover thing. We were like, F Land Rovers, we're going to go buy a Toyota. And then I started looking online, and we ended up getting another Land Rover. But while we were looking at it, we were like, this is Tango. And then it just stayed throughout. And then we said, if we win this auction, we'll go to Africa. And we won the auction, and now...
That was 2019, so the original plan with this vehicle, we bought it on an auction site, like Andy said. We were in Bolivia, and he was just looking, as he always does, at the market for vehicles and stuff. Came across this one, and it was a great deal, and we were like, okay, let's just go for it. We were considering Africa at this point in time, and we basically decided if we won the auction, then we would go to Africa. Won the auction, fast forward 4 months, we flew back over to the UK, built it out, and then we shipped it to South Africa. So this was now March of 2020, and everyone knows how March of 2020 went. So COVID, kind of like the lockdowns began about 3 days after we actually shipped it. We got the word, we called the company, we're like, hey, can we get it off the ship? They're like, yeah, for pretty much the same thing that you're paying to ship it all the way to South Africa.
Whoa.
So we're like, well, we might as well just risk it for the biscuit at this point, and we went ahead and shipped it to South Africa. 5 months later, after it being in storage, we shipped it back to the UK, did a couple of other trips, like UK to Turkey, up to the Arctic Circle.
No, UK to Sweden, then not Turkey.
Yeah, but we did UK to Turkey, and then we also did
UK
before
coming here, yeah.
And then after all of that, and after kind of the world opened back up, we never really gave up on the Africa dream, and so in February of this year, now 2023, we shipped Tango back down to Durban for round 2, and now we're about 5 months into what should be about a year-long trip. We'll see how it all goes.
That's awesome. So a little bit of perseverance paid off for sure. So when you were in Bolivia at the Salar de Uyuni, you saw this for sale, you were on another trip at that point.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love when that happens. You're like on a trip, thinking about another trip. It always
I feel
happens.
like that's usually the way it goes. But that trip, we originally thought, we're just going to do the California to Argentina trip, and then that'll be it. And then it was in Bolivia that the conversations really started.
And that trip for us were like, we'd never even heard, we didn't know overlanding were a thing. we thought, oh, we're just going to drive and probably not see anyone like us, and you know,
Surprise!
No one else
Yeah.
is doing this type of thing, you know.
So yeah, we looked at the map and we thought, oh, we'll drive from here to here in like, you know, it'll probably take like 2.5 months.
Naive,
Yeah.
so naive.
And it was your idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
it took us like 9, and that we're pushing it.
Yeah. So that time period, just to give a little bit of context, Andy was on a 2-year visa in the U.S. His visa was coming to a close, and we were both living in California. And it was kind of like we had the vehicles. We had never done a long trip. We had done like 4-day weekend trips, you know, in Joshua Tree and up to Yosemite and stuff like that. And he was like, hey, I really think I'm going to do this trip from California to Argentina. We've got the vehicle. I've now got the time. My visa's running out. And I was just kind of like, okay, I'll see you when I see you, you know, type of thing. And
How long had you been together at that point?
maybe 4 years?
Something like
Oh, okay. So it
Yeah.
had been a little while then.
Yeah.
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 I just-
But so like, I left the British Army and then got a visa for California, and that were like a 20-month visa. So I was just working at a little independent Land Rover garage, which were good because it got my confidence up as well for the trip. But a LR3 or Discovery 3 to the rest of the world came into the shop, and a guy were going to get rid of it because it needed a new transmission. And I think I paid like $3,000 for it, and my boss said, oh, you can take this old one out of a Range Rover Sport, a transmission out of a Range Rover Sport, put that in, and that's the vehicle that basically took us to the bottom of South America. So like a $3,000 vehicle.
Yeah.
And like everyone gives, you know, Land Rover a bad name. It was still on original air suspension, and it's got 220,000 miles on the clock. And,
Whoa.
yeah.
But this is kind of a cool full circle moment for Andy and I, because so Andy was trying to convince me in 2018 to quit my corporate 9-to-5 job and go on this trip from California to Argentina.
That were a really big thing for
That
you.
was a really big thing because I was very comfortable in my career. I had a great job and I knew kind of the direction I was going and all of that. So I really struggled with the idea of leaving that and not being able to come back to it.
Mm-hmm.
So when the idea first came up, I was like, yeah, it's a no-go for me. Like, it's a non-starter, not even having a conversation about it. And then after a couple of months and this is kind of like the full circle moment, Andy was showing me like Richard and Ashley's Instagram profile. And it was like, these guys are doing it. We could do it too, you know. And then
Sorry.
and then I would come home from work and he would casually have X Overland on the screen at the time. This is when they were on like Amazon and stuff. And so I was just starting to like open my eyes to the fact that, oh, there is other people doing this. I didn't even know that, like you said, overlanding was not in our vocabulary. This was not on our radar at all. And so that was the point that I was like, okay, we could maybe do this, you know? And so yeah, about a month before we actually left.
Well, we
is
only
when
decided to do this trip 3 months before we set off as well.
Yeah.
So like you had 2 months where you were like, no, I'm not going to do it. And then I showed them your profile and I'm like, these can do it. Because I think the problem is with international overlanding, and you've never done it before, is you're getting advice off people that have never done it. So they only see things on the news or whatever. And then we started saying, let's only take advice of people that have actually done it from that day forward. And then that sort of changed your mind a bit, and like getting out of that American bubble and saying, nah, let's just leave the job. She was so scared of leaving work, and like all work would have surpassed her and she'd never be able to catch up again, where realistically that's not a thing.
That's really important to bring up, because there is a sense of security and safety and predictability, and
100%.
a lot of people have asked me about that, and I know a lot of other travelers have had the same question. It's like, what are you going to do when you get back?
Yeah.
What are you going to do about your job when you get back?
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to go back to that job or get another one, and will you be able to find work afterwards? And so it's a really good point to bring up about it's important to feel that safety and that security and that stability.
Yeah, I think it was one of those of like, I don't know, the fear of missing out on such a big life experience is probably FOMO, in the simplest of terms, was what convinced me to end up actually going. But then from there, I think the moment that moment I decided to go was the moment that I started channeling all of my energy into the trip, and then other opportunities ended up coming up, and we made a plan around, for me it was really important to continue my career on the road. I really didn't want to take this year-long gap, or at the time it was supposed to be a year, we're now like 4 or 5 years in, and I didn't want to have that gap in my resume or whatever it is to then come back and say, oh yeah, we just decided to drive around the world. I really wanted to continue networking. I really wanted to continue all those relationships that we had. And now, 4 or 5 years in, I wouldn't want it any other way. And I do feel comfort in the fact, like Andy knew this prior to me knowing it, of like, there's always going to be another job. And there's always going to be another opportunity, and whatever you're doing in life is probably preparing you for the next thing anyways. So right now I feel very confident in the fact of like, if we decided to stop traveling tomorrow, I could probably find a job very easily, just simply because of our experience and the other stuff that we've done outside of what a typical 9-to-5 job is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something that anyone that's considering a long-term trip, there's probably some type of fear or obstacle that they're encountering. It may not be a job thing, but figuring out whatever that is and then recognizing, is it a true fear? Is it a true, like, is it actually true in your life that you're not going to be able to find another job? Or is it you just giving pushback to the opportunity because you're a little bit scared? And I was definitely scared of walking away from my job because it's the unknown.
Yes.
But ultimately, anything in the overland space, at least to us, is like, you can sit at home and be very comfortable. But overlanding to us is all about getting outside of that comfort zone, pushing past that, and trying to find new experiences, whether it's in your home country and it's close to home, or if it's around the world somewhere. And so I think that was the first kind of like break in the mold for me to open my eyes to say, okay, there might be something else out there, and it doesn't all have to be scary. We'll probably figure it out.
It's also a muscle.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I've been in those situations as well where we've taken a break
Yeah.
and we're getting back on the road. And I'm like, can we do this?
Yeah.
I'm so comfortable.
Yeah, yeah.
And everything's predictable. Having a little mental crisis about it. And then you leave and you're like, it's okay.
Yeah. Well, that was this past month. We've been home in the U.S. for a month. We went to just visit family and stuff, and just being surrounded by that on a day-to-day basis, I was like, man, we still have like half a trip in Africa, you know what I mean? And it's like a totally different mindset, and it's so easy to go back into that. So that just shows you, just a month at home, we were like, okay, we live here now.
Yes.
And you can do that at any point. So it's like almost forcing yourself on a daily basis, like just little things of...
I think basically you need to remind yourself that, like, what is a year out of your life in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah.
It's nothing if you were to just keep going as you are, but should you take the risk, it's probably a year that you'll never forget, and a year that you'll probably talk 100%. About when you're 70-year-old or whatever that would be.
Yeah, I can't agree with that more. I think it's...
And if you hate it, you probably have the resources to go back home and set up shop there
Home's
again.
Always going to be there, and it's probably you'll go back after say for instance, I'd been in California for a couple of years, then we'd done Central South America, then I've not been home for 3 years at that point, and I think, like what's going to, and then you get back, people are still in the same seats, talking about the same things, doing the same things, so you're not going to miss out generally.
Yeah, I think life is going to continue on, but you can pop back into it at any point, and that's kind of the beauty of it. So I don't know. I don't think anyone should ever be scared to just go for it, like whatever that may be. And
just like you said about going back home, a lot of people have a worry that, you know, something might happen with family or whatever, and you're on a different continent. Well, for us, Mary Hannah's grandma got sick, and we were in the top of Botswana. We just went on Google when we found some signal. Right, where's the next flights? It happened to be in Johannesburg, which was, like an 800-mile drive, but drive there, 800 mile, get on the plane. Before you know it, you're back in America.
Yeah. So you're never that far away from the comforts of home anyway. So even if you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere, well, if something did come up, then it's quite easy to get out of wherever you are, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think people see, oh, that's so far away. That's so scary. That's so out there, or whatever it may be, but you're really not, like, it's 2023, you're never really that far away from technology or airport or...
Yeah, and once you're on the ground, you adapt and learn, and every day you take one at a time.
Yeah,
so
totally.
tell me about shipping from the UK to South Africa. Like, where did you ship into? What was the process like? Do you have any advice? How did it go?
Yeah, I think that's a much easier process than most people think. We decided to ship to Durban rather than Cape Town because Durban has great storage options. So rather than being on the ground when the vehicle actually arrives to actually unload the container, there's an agent there that unloads the vehicles, brings it to the warehouse, does all of the customs paperwork, and then you basically fly down whenever you're ready to fly down.
Which is one thing as well, like say you use Durban over Cape Town, it's generally cheaper to keep it in the storage facility in Durban, and therefore you should always allow yourself a couple of weeks, like have the vehicle sat there for a couple of weeks.
We made that mistake.
If like the shipping company say to you, oh, it's going to be here on this date, at least give yourself a couple of weeks because it probably won't be.
We didn't do on this trip. So they told us for, let's just say it was the 15th. We said, okay, well, we'll book our flights for the 30th. And then we actually ended up having a 2-week delay in Germany. And so we that 2-week window sounded really great when we first booked our flights, but with that 2-week delay, we were going to get there before the vehicle, and then we'd be paying for hotels and all of that stuff. So we ended up, I think we just paid the change fee, which was like $250 or something, and we moved our flights back. But in hindsight, we should have just, there was no rush. We were putting the timelines on ourselves. We should have just booked the flight for, a month out from when our vehicle was actually supposed to arrive.
It can be unpredictable. I think that's the hard thing about shipping, where it could show up on time and be ready in 2 days, or it could take a couple of weeks.
But that's the beauty of using Durban, because even if it is sat there for a month, it's not going to cost you a lot of money in storage, and it's safe. Like we've done this shipping route twice because of COVID. So Tango sat in Durban for like just over 5 months. So before we had to ship him back to the UK.
But the main reason, so we were actually in Turkey when we decided to come back to Africa for this time around.
Yes.
And we were originally going to ship from Turkey to Egypt and then drive down. But and other people may find it is different in their case, but for us it was so difficult to get any quotes for that route, and everything was more expensive than actually for us to drive back from Turkey all the way to the UK and then ship down to South Africa.
Whoa.
So we decided, we've already done that route before, we know the process, it's really simple, let's just do that. So of course that doesn't make sense for everyone, but for us it was way easier to just go from the UK to Durban than to go from Turkey to Egypt, and we know the process on the actual South Africa side, so we knew that it wasn't going to be painful, where we've heard Egypt can be quite difficult as far as paperwork, vehicle paperwork, all of that stuff. So we were like, we'll deal with that when we're actually on the ground in Egypt rather than having to do that from afar.
And we used a company that we already know and trust. So we use I think we use those in South America too, but a company called IVSS. And basically they just sort it all out for you, so it's as easy as it can get, really. So
how did you decide on who you're going to use, like in the initial planning stage, when you're like, oh, we need to get this vehicle shipped? What do I do next?
So I think in our original shipping we went from Buenos Aires back to Texas. So we had our LR3 Discovery 3 for the rest of the world in Buenos Aires with us, and we needed to ship it back to the US, and we got quotes from all these different companies, and IVSS just seemed really on the ball, really good at communicating, and we decided to ship with them.
I think we didn't even know what to Google at the time. Like, you start Googling vehicle or shipping or container shipping, and then all these house movers come up, and we're like, wow, this is difficult. And then we finally, I don't know how we find IVSS, it must have been on Google, and then we called him and he was just like, yeah, I'll sort it.
So
as soon as we spoke to him, then he were like, why would we go anywhere else?
And they just know us there now. So, I mean, they keep a file of everyone, and it's really easy to say, like, hey, I shipped with you guys last year, we're looking to ship again. And they're usually pretty good. You can even go on their website and put in your destinations and get an instant quote, and then they will give you from there a more detailed quote once you're further down the line. which is great because sometimes, like right now, we're debating, because the Sudan situation is not looking so great, we're debating what our options are for our Trans-Africa trip. And it's easy to, like we did it 3 nights ago, we just went onto the website and said, okay, point A to point B, what are these 3 different options and what do those route prices look like, so we can start to compare. So to us, that's just been the easiest, like customer service side of things, website side of things to do. Yeah.
It's awesome too that anybody who's looking to ship to Durban probably, you know, could reach out to you guys, or if you're on Instagram or any of the Facebook groups, like the Overlanding Facebook groups, people are really willing to take the time to respond about what their experience was like shipping, especially if it was recent. Then you know,
and
you can check in.
It's ever changing. Like the prices during COVID skyrocketed, and then we just hit it at the perfect time to ship back down to Durban. The prices went from 16 grand. No, some of them were crazy during COVID, and then they came back down to around the 3 grand mark. So that's another thing, is a lot of people who may have not shipped a vehicle before, because that's not like a common thing, you know, unless you're doing international travel. I think a lot of people think it's way pricier. So they see, oh my God, you're shipping your vehicle around the world. That's insane. You guys must be so wealthy. It's around $3,000, which if you're going to be anywhere for an extended period of time, for us, for this route, for example, if you're going to be anywhere for an extended period of time, that's cheaper than what you could rent a vehicle for in South Africa for a week and a half. So it just makes sense for this particular style travel for us to ship wherever we can.
I think if you're going to come down here, because a lot of people, like, if you're going to rent an overland vehicle, South Africa is probably one of the best places in the world, because you can get, even if you want just something simple like a Hilux with a roof tent, up to like a truck bed camper, or even I've even seen Unimogs for rent. But if you are planning to do, say, like a 2 or a 3 month trip, you probably want to price that up against shipping your own vehicle from wherever you are. And you might find that it's actually cheaper to just use your own vehicle.
Yes, for sure. How many days did it take for your vehicle to
I want to say the
up?
First time we shipped it was 32 days, and this time it was closer to like 44 days from door to door, basically.
And where did you ship out of? Was it Portsmouth or?
No, it was not Felixstowe. Somewhere in Essex, Folkestone. So like the south of England.
Okay. Yeah. Great. And then once you're on the ground, I'm assuming you've done some research, and let's talk about South Africa and logistics and planning, and what were the most useful resources for you when you were planning your trip, where you're on the road while you're here?
I think a lot of people probably plan a lot more than we do. So Andy and I are kind of like, we like to get a general plan of, you know, point A to point B and the must-see spots of where we're going to go.
I'll normally do the point A to point B. So I'll say, right, I think we can get from, you know, Cape Town to Cairo or whatever, and then I'll look in between that, like, right, which countries do we need to avoid because they're unstable right now, or civil wars or whatever is going on in the world.
More from like a safety and political
So I'll think of like generally the safety thing, and then from then on she'll make the nice things.
Make it all happen. So we don't overwhelm ourselves with planning an entire trip in one sitting. So
that is wise.
It's a lot. So rather than do that, we just take it in little bite-sized chunks. So we'll plan the general route. Like Andy said, he'll look at it from a safety, political landscape perspective. We'll say, okay, we're going to do this to this. And then we look at, okay, where are the must-see places that we've always dreamed of going? And we kind of map those out. A lot of the time we already have them mapped out because we just kind of are in a constant state of planning.
Is that kind of like from Instagram or blogs or everything? Or?
I think everything. We just always add points to our Google Maps. And so it's just like want to go.
If you see something come up, then you go into your map.
Just drop a pin there.
Nice.
And so a route starts to form of like, oh, this is, okay, I can kind of see all the dots starting to connect. And then from there, once we're actually in the area, that's when it's like a week to 2 weeks out is when we get down to the more nitty gritty. We really start talking to like locals and
people come in the opposite direction, because say for instance, like you know yourself, you drove the Pan American north to south, right? Is that what you did?
Yeah.
But then there's always people coming the opposite way, and then they'll say, oh, you need to see this, this and this. So there's no point planning too much, because you'll get a lot of advice like a couple of weeks out.
And then in South Africa, or in Southern Africa, we've been using Tracks for Africa so much on this trip. That's great for any of like the back road stuff.
Are you using their paper map or app, or
We're using the app.
the app?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Nice.
you bought the like premium version, which is great because it gives you all these points of interest along the way as well.
And you can zoom in closer.
You can zoom in really close. So we've been using that a lot, and then trusty Overlander.
Oh, yeah.
For just a good resource for anybody that's on the road. So that's like our two primary things that we've been using here. But we always try and leave flexibility in the route, no matter how dialed in we think our plan is, for any mishaps, mechanical breakdowns, or simply just someone saying, I really think you should head here, because you may have the perfect plan in your mind, but someone who actually lives there probably knows a little bit more on the best places to see, or the spots that aren't as discussed as much. So we usually try and pull everyone where we can to say, like, okay, if you were on this trip, what would you do? And then kind of tailor the route to that as well.
Nice. What have been some big highlights for you two on this part of the trip in South Africa?
For me, so we came from Durban and then we headed north, and there's a little country within South Africa called Lesotho, and I think it's the highest country in Africa, like pound for pound, however you want to word it. But that was such a cool, like, welcome to Africa feeling, like how you imagine Africa after watching it on the TV.
It's like rich red dirt roads and like green lush mountainscapes everywhere, and just like all the villages that you go through and stuff. It was just such a cool...
Your arm ends up aching because you're waving at that many
Yeah,
people.
you're like, hey, everyone's just so friendly.
And
And
the
like,
kids are chasing you down the street,
yeah.
and like they love your vehicle and they think it's cool, and everyone's nice to you. And
it was just
so that
really
were a
good
really big
moment.
highlight for me.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is in northern Namibia, seeing the Himba tribe there, and trying to communicate even though we can't speak each other's language, and like sharing things, like we give them a gift and then they give us a gift, and then
like potatoes
we
and
showed
bread.
them inside our house and they showed us inside their house, and
yeah,
that were cool.
I feel like it's those moments of like almost humanity where you're like, this is so neat. Like, we couldn't speak their language at all, and they couldn't speak English, maybe like a yes or no or something like that, but just like breaking down all the barriers and feeling like this is why you're here, to have those moments of interaction and human connection and stuff.
Getting that real 4D experience of, like, you can see it on TV and it's nice. Don't get me wrong, I love watching David Attenborough or whatever, but like when you get there for yourself and you can actually like smell the place and feel the place, and that's why you do it.
Yeah.
And they're genuinely interested in you. And we visited the Himba tribe in northern Namibia as well, and it was such an incredible experience, but I was also kind of like, I don't want to offend them.
That's quite a difficult thing anywhere you go, because like
trying to read it.
you're reading the room, and also we like to document a lot of our stuff, and so you want to always be respectful anywhere you're going, that you are admiring and appreciating a place, and it's not coming off as like someone's just coming in and being a tourist and snapping a photo and then walking away.
Yes.
So we are very mindful of that everywhere that we go, and sometimes like we won't pull the camera out at all, only if it really feels like, okay, we're on a friendly enough level that they'd be comfortable with that, and it's always trying to find that balance. For me, Africa as a whole, before we even came, was all about the wildlife. I was just so excited to experience that side of the world, because you can go so many places in the world, but you can't beat the wildlife in Africa. And my granddad used to go, he's been on 3 or 4 trips, and so even, I think I was like 10 years old the first time he came home, and he makes photo books from all of his trips. So he came we were living in Texas at the time, and showed us his photo book from Africa, and I was like, I must go, ever since then. So this is going on 15 years or longer. How old am I now? 20 years of me daydreaming about this, and to finally be here. Like, my first experience, it was so simple. It was zebra that we saw, and I like broke down in tears because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm photographing a zebra in Africa. It's
more than just a zebra.
Yeah. And I told the farmer, bless his heart, oh my gosh, I just saw a zebra, and he's like, zebras are so common here. He was like,
same with ostrich. We were
yeah,
like, look at that ostrich.
look at the ostriches,
And the locals are like, It's
Yeah.
an ostrich. It's
It's
like
like
seeing a
seeing-
pigeon.
Or
you
like
know?
a sheep or whatever, you know, in England. And
Where was the zebra?
the
that you
zebra
guys
was we had just coming out of Lesotho. We crossed the border back
Oh,
into South
yeah,
Africa,
yeah, yeah.
and we went to this little farm we found on Overlander. In a fantastic place. There was no one
Little
else
campsite
there.
farm on it.
And so casual, we pull in and he said, oh, if you guys want to go for a drive, you're welcome to go for a drive on the property. We still didn't fully realize that this was like a proper game reserve or like a private game reserve.
Private game reserve, and
Yeah.
like he said, like basically it's a game drive, a self-game drive.
Yeah.
But we didn't know. We thought it was just a campsite, and they're like, "Oh, just drive up the hill there and go and have a look." And then
Yeah.
we came over the hill, and all of a sudden there were
Oh my God,
there were
oh my
wildebeests and zebras and
Yeah.
we're like,
Ostriches running around and all
yeah.
sorts of, I was just like, oh, this is, and that for me, throughout the trip has been such a neat thing. Plus, I think some of the landscape that you get here, like Sandwich Harbor, you know, where else in the world do the dunes and ocean meet? Or
That's on the coast of Namibia.
yeah, we almost lost our vehicle there. So
Tell us about that.
oh God, classic. We thought, oh, yeah,
We got
don't-
humbled.
We basically, yes, we quickly got humbled by Namibia. We thought, oh, we don't need a guide. Plenty of people have done this. Like,
Because a lot of it's hard to like find out what is just a tourist trap and
Yeah.
what isn't. So
Yeah.
like the people are always, no matter when you go abroad, they're like, oh yeah, you have to have a guide, you have to have the.
Yeah.
Most of the time you don't. After that we were like, oh
oh,
maybe we
maybe a
should.
guide's not such a bad idea for this route. But basically, the tide, there's a very short window that you can drive. It's a very simple route. It's one way in, one way out. But the tide is what you really are playing with there. So there's maybe an hour window that you have to go in and out. And depending on the time of year and the tides that day and all of that.
Moon cycle.
Yeah.
That was
moon
something
cycle.
like we're not even surfers and stuff, so we don't really know much about tides.
I just looked at the tide chart and I talked to a couple locals and I talked to a couple tour guide companies just on a personal level to say, hey, do you think we can do this? And they're like, yeah, the tide looks great for that day. We went exactly at the right time. We went in, we turned around exactly at low tide, and we start coming out and we get stuck.
And the funny thing is, going down there, although you know it got your heart racing and what have you.
I mean, we're so top heavy that.
Yeah, we're a top heavy vehicle, you know. Yeah, it got your heart going and we're like, oh wow, we've made it. And it didn't feel like such a big deal because when everything goes right, everything's going right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so as option at that point is to go back over the big dunes and work your way back that way, or just
Is our
turn
original
around.
plan.
And you don't really know what the dunes are like in there, do
Yes,
you?
and
Because it could be.
that was part of the problem. Is we are such a top heavy vehicle. We had just come down this route and we are bouncing back and forth. And there's a few times where we're like, okay, we are going into the ocean. So we get down to this point and the options are going up this incredibly steep sand dune that we don't know. And then, okay, say you get up there and you can't make it out of that situation. Well, now you're stuck for a full 12 hours until the
Right.
tides come back down for us to make our way out. So we decided, okay, let's just turn around and go back out. It was fine coming in. We can make it out. We're exactly at low tide. Like we've got probably 30 to 45 minutes before the tide's going to come back in to where the tracks are going to be covered. But unfortunately, we turned around and maybe 5 minutes down the sand, we ended up getting stuck. And we made a video of this, and I happened to have the drone up in the air.
And luckily
during
we're
it.
with our friends Harry and Chloe as well.
Yeah, so they jumped out of the car. They're running down with Max Tracks. We get the Max Tracks off the top. I throw the drone into the car like the controller. And I'm like, please be there when I come back, little drone, you know. And yeah, we ended up getting unstuck. Thankfully, a tour guide actually ran out and was like, hey, you need to reverse back down to the water, which is counterintuitive when you're in that situation. You're trying to get away from the water. And he was like, no, you just got to go back down and get closer to the water so you can get on the harder stuff to get out. And we got out. It was maybe 5 to 10 minutes max that we were
But it
stuck.
wasn't even 5 minutes,
But,
but like
You know,
every
time
minute
slows
felt like
down
10 minutes.
And yeah, and then we raced the tide basically to get back out.
Yeah, and like literally the tide will come in and you'll stop, let it go out and then keep going, you know, because it's, and that time of the year as well, there's a lot of freak waves, which we found out
only a week later.
a week after we did it.
Whoa.
I think it were a Hilux, got a freak wave, hit it, it went up into the airbox, sucked it into the engine, stalled the engine, it couldn't get it going again. Then the wave came in, turned the Hilux onto its roof, and they lost everything.
Yeah. So that's one thing, is like with that route, a lot of people said, oh, you guys were silly for even trying it without a tour guide. But the irony is that the following week, that vehicle that Andy's talking about was a tour guide. So he drives that route every single day.
Yeah, he's done it hundreds of times.
And he went out, there was a freak wave that came, and it's just a very gnarly route. That's all there is to it. So I'm glad we did it and checked it off the whole bucket list, but I don't think I would do it again in my own vehicle. I think I would just happily go sit in a tour guide's vehicle and go on our merry way.
Let him use his insurance.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Wow. Any other experiences in either South Africa or Namibia that really resonated or you would recommend to other people?
I think Apupa Falls, which is where we met the Himba village, we met the Himba people, that was incredible. And especially after, so from the Orange River in South Africa, which is right on the border, you cross into Namibia.
Yeah, but that Orange River route as well, that Adrian suggested to us.
Oh, the Namakwa 4x4 trail.
That was a really cool trail.
So we did the Namakwa 4x4 trail, which is fantastic. I think you guys did it as well.
We did. It was great.
So cool.
Yeah.
And then we crossed into Namibia. So from the Orange River, which is the Namakwa 4x4 trail, all the way to the top of Namibia, you don't see another ounce of water, or at least we didn't during that time of year. And so when we finally made it to Apupa Falls, we were like, oh my gosh, this is an oasis. You know, it's just so lush and green and different than everywhere else in Namibia. So
There's some really great campgrounds in that area.
Yeah, fantastic. You could just live in that little
just a simple thing for me, like coming from England, everything's tarmac, you know, and it's a small country. So just being on gravel roads, like I think we entered Namibia, wherever we entered on the south, we didn't see another gravel road, another tarmac road till we got to Windhoek, and we'd done hundreds of miles by that point. So just to be on, actually using your vehicle for what it's made for, like basically that Defender we've got is overkill for the UK. You're probably better off having a camper van. But out here, actually using that vehicle, what it was built for, and putting it through its paces, and looking back and the African sunset, like how you've seen it on TV, and there's dust coming off, and like it's getting blown up, and all the dust going orange, and I look back in the mirror probably every day, and I'm like,
he's like, look at the dust trail, like look at that light,
the dust,
you know?
the dust. Look, I feel like I'm in a fighter jet, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, this is cool.
Yeah.
This is a cool moment of his life that we're in right now.
I was just going to say, I do feel like Africa, for the overlanding side of things, is like a completely different beast than anywhere else that we've been. Like, it's really tough on your vehicle. That's something that I would, if anyone's considering doing a trip out here, like really do all the maintenance, do all the things that...
I'd actually also consider, obviously I'm a Land Rover guy, we're driving a Defender. Think about, rather than, if you're not a mechanic yourself and you're going to pay for a mechanic in the UK to do your pre-maintenance before you do this trip, I'd actually think about shipping it to here, getting one of the local mechanics here. Like there's a good company in Cape Town area called Gateway 4x4, or that guy that we use near Lesotho, because they see things that our mechanics in the UK will see. Because you're going to be driving on hundreds and hundreds of miles of corrugated roads. So like, our mechanics in the UK will take something apart and they'll be like, oh, that wiring loom doesn't need to go back there, or that bolt doesn't need to go back in. Every single bolt needs to be perfect, and your wiring loom needs to be pushed back, or do extra things, like things that we'd never think of. So for instance, this engine that we've got, it's the Ford Ranger or the Ford Transit engine in the Defender. And it's just got an engine cover, but that engine cover sits on top of the plastic rocker cover, and that moves. So if you let it, it'll just wear a hole in the top of your engine, basically.
Yeah.
You know, and other things like, I just noticed yesterday, just because I always just do maintenance all the time, just keep an eye on things.
You have to here.
I didn't put a tie wrap back on, and I've just noticed the rattling. The cable that goes to my mass airflow sensor, I can see the copper on it, so it's just about to wear through, and that's just because the vibrations out here on these corrugated roads are, if there's anything wrong with your vehicle, or partly wrong, or about to be wrong, these African roads will find that.
Yeah,
100%.
definitely put it to the test. Yeah.
Yes. can confirm. Yeah, everything is just rattle.
Yeah.
Somebody referenced they called it it was a local was talking about the African massage. It's like how you feel in the vehicle all the
There's
time.
been a few times that we'll be driving in the car and we're just both like, we're looking at each other like, is this real life right now? Because it's just, like I said, it's just a completely different beast than anywhere else that we've been.
And your accessories, like all your aftermarket accessories, you kind of have to start worrying about those because things will start unscrewing themselves. And so every single extra thing you put on, you kind of have to be watching all the time.
Yeah, if on your pre-inspection and all that, one thing that I would suggest doing is going around every bolt with like a yellow pen marker and then mark everything, and then you'll see straight away.
Rotating.
Like just do a visual inspection every morning before you set off. You know, like end of day, like you're driving you home. So like it's all right for weekend warriors or whatever to go smash a bit of rock crawling or whatever they want to do, but that ain't gonna get you from Cape Town back to England if you drive like that.
Yeah, definitely.
You'll have fun in that short time though. But
Yes, you will.
Oh God.
What has camping been like here? There's such a camp culture that I haven't experienced before. Sorry, I'm not answering the question, but it's just a different, I've never experienced camping like this before.
Yeah. The culture here is like, you think, we think, oh, overlanding in the US and everyone meets up at a show and it's like people are just now getting into the industry or whatever, overlanding's becoming a thing. Here, it is like a cultural phenomenon. It has been going for ages and people are just raised on it. So they don't go on family vacations overseas, they go camping. And there's
generalizing.
Yeah. No, but you know what I mean? Like, so
but like
many people.
your average family is, your holiday is, we're gonna, and they are not scared
Pack
to
the
crank
car
out
up,
the miles as
do
well.
some
They
miles.
might live in Cape Town. They're like, right, we're going to be in the top of Namibia by tomorrow.
Yes.
And then
Waking
they'll-
up at 3 a.m.
Yes, yeah. And
so they will smash out 1,000 miles in a day and then get to where they want to go, and they will go past you on those gravel roads at like 90 miles an hour with a trailer on. And that's a big part of their culture, is spending time camping as a family.
Which is so neat to see. There's so many families out there. There's so many older people out there as well. Like in the US or the UK, you generally get the younger population, say like up to 40, 45 or whatever. Here, it's like, it's very common to be the youngest person on a trail or the youngest person at a campsite. And that's just because people are so ingrained, that's just part of their culture.
It's part of their life, basically, now.
But it's also great because it means for international overlanders, you get to come here and there's fantastic facilities. So there's great campsites everywhere you want to go.
Like donkey boilers for your hot water.
Like
I love donkey boilers and showering outside.
Yes, it's so good. So and braais at every single campsite.
I was just about to say that, like, braaiing to the South African, to us, cooking on wood is something you'll only do when you're camping. We've been invited to quite a few locals' homes, and they've got basically a campfire inside the house, and they'll make food indoors like that too.
It's a religion.
Yes.
The braai.
Yes.
Oh, also, for anybody who's listening and doesn't know what a donkey boiler is, we got really excited about the donkey boiler, but
or a braai, for instance, as well.
Or a braai,
that's a barbecue,
let's
but
define
cooking
some
on wood.
things.
yes, define.
Yeah.
So a donkey boiler is basically like usually like a metal tin that you put a fire in, and then the water is pulled around, correct?
Basically you're heating up like a metal tank with firewood, and then that will be how your showers are
so the
heated.
water is getting pumped through, but the water is heating up as it passes over the fire, and then it's going to the shower. So you're getting a hot shower, which in the middle of nowhere, where otherwise this rugged, rustic campsite wouldn't have. You can still have a hot shower.
Just the locals flying over.
Yeah. And then a braai is basically like a barbecue,
But using
but
firewood.
you're using firewood. So
you'll make your own coals. So it takes longer, but it's all part of it.
Yeah. Which is a huge thing. Everyone gets to their campsite, they put the fire on, they crack a couple of beers, and then they, like, over a 2 to 3 hour period, will braai their food and enjoy it and stuff as a group.
I
which is really
thought
cool.
the English could drink until we came to South Africa.
Rum and Coke.
Rum and Coke,
Yeah.
beers all the day,
Yes.
and a lot of meat.
Gotta be the brandy and
There's a
Coke.
lot of meat eaten here.
Yeah. We went to a few braais, and what do you bring to a braai? They have so much stuff already, so I'd always bring like a salad or something, and they're like, we don't eat salad here. That's not a thing. Chicken is our
Chicken
salad.
is salad.
So yeah, definitely been fun to see the cultural differences and all of that.
It's funny, like traveling as a couple, I wouldn't spend the time to make a fire just for the two of us very often. But here it's really, I love it. It's
and we've
definitely
been
part
doing
of it.
Like,
yeah, we're like nearly every night.
almost every single night. I think we've just fully embraced the South African ways, and we've just been braaiing as often as we can, because it's also nice to, we have induction or we have the option to braai basically, and so it's been nice to just get out and enjoy and really soak up whatever campsite or camp spot that we're at here.
It does seem to be an easy thing to do that's really lovely here.
Yeah.
Like I would definitely just keep doing it. Doing it.
Just got into
It's one of those things
Yeah.
like wherever you go in the world, you'll take something back home with you and like braai.
Right. Andy and I are like, okay, when we have our house in the U.S. or wherever we end up, we will have a braai inside of our house. Like we are taking that little piece of South Africa, we're gonna bring it back with us. 'Cause it's
Indoor
just so
braais
cool.
and a communal like hangout.
Yep. Yeah.
Any favorite meat cuts? I feel like they're really
Lamb
passionate
has
about
We've
been
them.
been
the
eating
main.
a lot of lamb here, which I don't usually eat much lamb at home, but just on the grill, you can't beat it. Yeah, so probably that, and I don't know, just a bit of everything.
If somebody was interested in coming to, let's say, South Africa or Namibia, because you guys have spent most of your time in those two countries, what advice or practical tips would you give to them?
I'd say the first thing is don't listen to all the fear mongering about Southern Africa, because that alone could probably put you off. This is one of the safest places I've felt in
any other
it just feels I feel just as safe here as I do in England.
Well, there was even some places in Europe that I felt less safe than here.
Definitely.
But before we came, we were told, even from a lot of South Africans, and obviously living here may be a different experience, and I'm not discrediting anything that's happened to anyone, but there was a lot of fear put into us of like, you do not stop at a stoplight, you do not do this, you're going to get robbed, just get ready for the gunpoint, like all of this stuff.
Especially in Johannesburg.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we came down mentally prepared for that, and we're almost like, oh my gosh, at any second anything could happen, and it has been the exact opposite, and everyone's been so welcoming, and we've had a fantastic experience. So I would definitely recommend anyone that's coming down here, like, yes, talk to locals, always great to talk to locals and hear where not to go and what not to do, but I would definitely recommend speaking to people that have traveled it recently and make sure that, what's the actual boots on the ground story, and that could be true for anywhere that you travel. If you look at the media side of things, you're going to get a completely different story than what you're going to get actually there. So.
I think if you just do the basics, like don't drive at night, stick to the speed limits, and you'll be fine. I would say like a recommendation for a short trip is what we've just done. Like Mary Hannah just brought her mum out, and we've flown into Johannesburg. Then we've drove from Johannesburg south to the bottom of Kruger, and then worked his way up through Kruger, and then the
panorama route is coming back down. So we basically went like southern Kruger all the way up to, I think it's Tinsday Rustic Camp, Mopani area, and then we came out of the park and took the panorama route back down, and then came back over, and it was, I think, 10 or 11 days in total, and it was just a fantastic trip, and the best wildlife we've seen anywhere.
And I know, like, a lot of people as well will say, like, oh, Kruger's a bit touristy and all this, but we went when Kruger were fully booked up, and Kruger's that big that there's plenty to see still, and you're not going to be, like, overwhelmed by. But we saw, within the first 30 minutes of being in Kruger, we saw more animals there than we'd seen in the last 4.5 months in the rest of Southern Africa.
I mean, the only thing that was comparable was like the private game reserve that we went to. There was one just outside of Port Elizabeth that we went to. Scotia, but it's such a small reserve that it's a completely different experience than seeing animals that are free to roam in this massive space. So I think going into it, we had heard from a lot of locals and a lot of people that had been there, like, ooh, I don't really know if you're gonna like it. and we absolutely loved it. So I think if anyone wanted to do like a short trip,
A 2-week trip
a
in
2-week
South
trip,
Africa.
fly
like,
in and out of Johannesburg. If you're from the U.S., Atlanta to Johannesburg, direct flight, and do that route, it's phenomenal.
And once you get on the ground, like the initial cost of the flights can
Yeah.
be expensive,
Yeah.
but I think it's a pretty good place for the budget-minded traveler.
Yes.
We just paid $800 direct flight to Atlanta.
Yeah, it was $800 for the direct flight per person, and then my mom came out for 2 weeks. I was telling you earlier, and I tallied up everything because I just put it all on my card, and then we just, worked it out later. And I think she paid $650 in total for the entire 12 days that she was here, which is phenomenal for everything that we got to see in that period of time. So, yeah, I would definitely recommend looking into that if anyone's wanting to come in for a short little jaunt.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So it is getting dark. We need to go do our braai.
And Africa's colder than you think.
Yeah.
If you come this time of year,
Yeah,
we're
bring
sat
a
here
jacket.
shivering now.
There
So
was-
bring your woolly hat.
snow 2 months ago here. It
Insane.
was cold, but yeah, thank you guys so much for taking the time. And where can we find you on the internet?
Our handle is Expedition Rove, or our website, or whatever. So yeah, website, Instagram, YouTube, kinda sometimes, not really consistently.
If you were interested in our build, we do have one good video for YouTube, which is our build walk around. So for all guys who are really into gadgets
Yeah.
and stuff, that's a detailed overview. But if you've not seen us before and you're flicking through Instagram, Expedition Rove, it's a bright orange Defender.
Yeah, I can't miss it.
Perfect. Thank you again so much for
Thank you.
taking the time to sit
Yeah.
down with me, share your stories and your experience and tips with the Overland Journal Podcast listeners. And yeah, thank you again, and let's go hit some braai.
Phew,
Yeah,
let's
let's
ride.
do it.
Thank you.
Okay.